Thank you. Good evening. The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, November 10th, 2021 is now called to order. Director Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Barnett,
Present.
Commissioner Thomas,
Present.
Commissioner Tabana,
Here.
Commissioner Suzuki,
Here.
Commissioner Hanson,
Here.
Vice Chair Birch,
Here.
and Chair Janoff.
Here. Thank you. As the Planning Commission conducts this meeting on behalf of the Town Council and residents of Los Gatos, we encourage active participation, which is essential for democracy and critical to the work of the Planning Commission. Your participation can occur through written comments about agenda items submitted to staff prior to a meeting, which are always helpful and welcome. During our meeting, there are two opportunities for members of the public to participate. During the verbal communications, an individual may speak on any topic not on the agenda. And during the hearing of a specific item, any member of the public may speak about that item on the agenda. When called to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Alternatively, you may choose to speak anonymously. It is requested that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have now come to the verbal communications portion of our meeting. At this time, members of the public are invited to address the Commission on any issues not on the agenda. And before we ask the public if they have any comments to provide to us tonight, at this time, we would like to remember our former Planning Commissioner, Tom O'Donnell, who passed away last week. And I'd like to invite any commissioners or members of the public to say a few words. Vice Chair Birch.
Yes, thank you, Chair Janoff. I would just like to say that any of us that had the distinct pleasure of serving with Tom learned a great deal, sometimes how to have a lively debate, how to have humor in the middle of very stressful situations, and just how to respect the process. For those that may not know, Tom served this community for many, many years in a lot of different ways, and his loss will be felt through multiple aspects of our community. I appreciate having the opportunity to just say how much he meant to all of us, what a good person he was, a kind person, and he will be deeply, deeply missed.
Thank you for those words. Commissioner Hanson.
I wanted to echo everything that Vice Chair Birch said as well. When Tom O'Donnell was on the Planning Commission pretty much the entire time from when I started until just recently when he chose not to renew. And I remember from the very first year that I was on the Planning Commission, Tom always had this amazing ability to and it was because of his legal background, because of all of his experience and all the things he's done for the community. But he was the one person that I've never seen anyone do the same thing on the commission, where he would like listen to the entire hearing and he could net everything out that everyone said, 100 people from the public, everyone in the commission, and he would net it out to one sentence. And it would make sense. And you'd be like, oh, yes, of course, that's exactly where we're going with this thing. And he also was a chair, during my time on the commission, and he was so very good at working with everyone on the commission to make sure that we adhered to meeting protocols. For example, there are some commissioners that would want to talk instead of asking a question of an applicant, and Tom would always make sure, what is your question? And he would, make sure that you got to the point. And so I just have this amazing, undying respect for Tom. And when I heard that he had passed, it just tore me up because I have so much respect for him. And as Vice Chair Birch said, we on the Planning Commission were just a small part of all the things that he did in his life and all the parts of the community that he served. And so I think that the Planning Commission will feel his loss, but it will reverberate through the rest of the community as well.
Thank you for those words. Director Paulson, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak regarding Tom O'Donnell's passing?
We do. I'll allow Chuck to speak.
Hi, Chuck Hammers, 16230 Shannon Road. You know, at Hillbrook School, one of the things that we say a lot with the kids is, what do you care about and what are you going to do about it? And, you know, I think of the best example of that in teaching kids would be Tom's life. Tom spent, you know, decades with the school district and then all the time on the planning commission. And, you know, I got to know him through the, when we were working on the CUP, he was very thoughtful and asked very good questions and was great up there. So I just wanted to say that I appreciated him and I'm sorry for the loss for those of you that worked with him.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Hammer. Any other comments from the public? Director Paulson?
I don't see any hands raised. Let me just check one more time. There are no additional hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. And I would just like to add my comments as well. Tom was an incredible influence to a new member coming onto the Planning Commission. You could count on him to be patient, but very strict. And his guidance was clear. It was firm. It was and extremely helpful. And those of us who worked with Tom on the Planning Commission, at least speaking for myself, you know, we try to, in leadership roles, now that I am chairperson, have tried very hard to think about the ways that Tom led this organization and helped individuals along the way. And we strive to do the same. So just wanted to say he's been an incredible example for me personally, and he will be missed. All right, thank you for that. And we wish his family well, and we'll move on. Director Paulson, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on any other matter not on the agenda?
I don't see any hands raised for other items not on the agenda. Let's give it a second. Seeing none, Chair.
All right, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the consent calendar. We have two items to be acted upon with a single motion. The approval of the drafted minutes from our October 27, 2021 Planning Commission meeting, and the annual review of an approved conditional use permit for an existing private school, Hillbrook School, on property zoned HR1, located at 300 Marchmont Drive, APNs 532-1001 and 532-11011. Conditional use permit application U12-002, applicant property owner Mark Silver, Hillbrook School, project planner Jocelyn Shootman. Is that correct? Yeah. Do any commission members or members of the public wish to pull any item from the consent calendar or have any disclosures to make? Commissioner Barnett.
Yeah, I'll be recusing myself on this matter based on the proximity of my house to Hillbrook School.
All right, thank you. So staff will.
And I don't see any members of the public with their hands raised wishing to pull either of the items.
All right. So just a question, do we approve these together or do we need to do the Hillbrook motion with the specific items it requires as an additional?
We can approve them together with the notation that Commissioner Barnett is recusing himself on item number 2.
All right. All right, thank you for that. Then do I have a Commissioner Hanson?
I did have one correction I was going to request to the minutes. I didn't think it required pulling it to create it as a hearing, but I just wanted to bring that up now before we move off of the point.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, so in the minutes for our last meeting, we voted to allow a fence height exception on Alorcha Drive here in Los Gatos, and it was noted, the comments from the public, and noted that we voted to approve it, but we had a specific reason why we approved it, and I thought it was really important to include that in the minutes. And the issue is that the applicant had wanted to do this because of privacy and also because they had vineyards that he needed to be protected from deer and whatnot. And we were concerned as a planning commission to not set a precedent that anyone that was worried about someone walking in their yard would want to put up a 6-foot fence. And so the reason we gave was the other category where the concern was because of their vineyards, which was worth a great deal of money and could not be protected with deer without a higher fence. So I don't know if there's a way to modify the minutes to say that it was solely for that reason, not for privacy and security, but I was hoping to make that, some kind of modification in the minutes.
Yes, that's perfectly appropriate. So whoever makes the motion can include that modification. Or if you make the motion, you can include that modification and we'll move forward from there.
Thank you for that. So do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Hanson.
Sorry about that. So I move to approve the consent calendar, including the minutes from our last meeting, as well as the annual report from Hillbrook School. And with the change that I suggested to be more clear about the reasons we approved the fence height exception in our last meeting.
Thank you for that. Do I have a second? Commissioner Tabana.
I'll second that.
Thank you for that. And do we need to add the findings for Hillbrook, Director Paulson, or just refer to Exhibit 2?
No, those are included as part of the consent calendar.
Great. Thank you for that. Then we will call the vote unless there are any other questions. I don't see any hands raised. Commissioner Hanson.
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, as to the minutes.
Yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Suzuki.
Yes.
Vice Chair Birch.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the consent calendar passes. We'll now move on to public hearings, which is agenda item 3, considering appeal of the Community Development Director decision to deny a fence height exception request for construction of a 6-foot tall vehicular gate and fencing within the required street side setbacks, traffic view area, and driveway view area, and construction of a vehicular gate with reduced setbacks on property located in the Almond Grove District, Almond Grove Historic District, zoned R1D LHP, located at 103 Tate Avenue, APN 510-18-038, property owner Ballou Ventures LLC, applicant Christy Ballou, and project planner is Sean Mullen. Are there disclosures tonight? Commissioner Birch, Vice Chair Birch.
For professional reasons, I have to recuse myself from this item.
All right, thank you. And may I see a show of hands of commissioners who have visited this property? All right, thank you for that. Mr. Mullen, I understand you'll be giving the staff report tonight.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The project before you tonight is an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to deny an exception to the town's fence regulations. In 2019, the town updated the fence regulations in the town code. Included in these updates was a 3-foot height limitation for fences located in the front and street side yard areas, traffic view areas, and driveway view areas. This regulation is intended to minimize conflict between pedestrians, cyclists, and cars by ensuring fences and gates do not obstruct views. The updated fence regulations also included a minimum 18-foot setback for vehicular gates as measured from the edge of the roadway. The intent of this regulation is to allow vehicles to clear the travel lanes while queuing as the gate is opening. The subject property is located at the corner of Tate and Bean Avenues. The property owner requested an exception to the fence regulations, citing security and privacy concerns, to construct a 6-foot tall vehicular gate and fencing within the required street side setback, traffic view area, and driveway view area. The proposed vehicular gate would be set back approximately 18 inches from the property line, and the fencing would be set at the property line. Additionally, the proposed vehicular gate would be set back 8 feet from the edge of Bean Avenue. Staff was unable to support the requested exceptions and denied the request due to safety concerns created by the location of the solid fencing relative to the driveway and the location of the vehicular gate. This decision was appealed to the Planning Commission by the owner, who reiterates their safety and privacy concerns, states that the request is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and indicates that strict adherence to the fence regulations would limit their private outdoor areas. The appeal also included several examples in the surrounding neighborhood of fences and gates similar to those requested that do not comply with the town's fence regulations. It is likely that these examples predate the 2019 fence regulations or were constructed without approval of an exception to the fence regulations. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal, uphold the decision of the Community Development Director, and deny the exceptions to the town fence regulations. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Commissioner Hanson.
So I wanted to ask staff, I after looking at the property, I mean, they're a corner lot, and so their side yard as well as their front yard, are facing the street, and then part of their side yard includes their backyard. And so, did you discuss any alternatives that would get closer to their security concern? Like, is there some kind of compromise alternative where they could get some protection for their backyard, but not violate as much of the fence regulations?
Thank you. Prior to sending out the formal decision on the original request, I did have a conversation with the property owner. I believe it was around September 17th to express the concerns that staff was having with the requested exception and to walk them through the process moving forward if the decision was to deny the exception, and to see if there were any alternatives that they wanted to explore. At that time, the property owner wanted to move forward with the proposal and was aware that the decision would be to deny the request.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff at this time? I don't see any hands raised, so we will now open the public hearing and give the appellant up to 5 minutes to address the commission.
Thank you, Chair. So whoever is going to speak on behalf of the appellant. Okay, looks like Michael. 1 second. Michael, you can unmute yourself and you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Sean, and thank you everyone for your time this evening. Christy and I are the owners of 103 Tate. We purchased the property in 2019, and we just finished a historical renovation. We moved in May, and we're in our final stages now of finishing the garage and doing the landscape. Sean, do you mind bringing up the slide deck? There we go. So the first slide is the plot map, which shows our property at the corner of Tate and Bean. You can see that I believe it was back in the 40s, they split our lot. So we have a smaller lot at 6,300 square feet, and it does not go back through to the alley, which most of the properties on Tate and Soul and Wilder do. So we don't have that back access. It's a very public location. That's St. Mary's catty corner from our property, and then Santa Cruz Avenue is just 2 blocks from the corner. So very busy, very active street/corner. Sean, do you mind going down to the next page, which is the site plan? Thank you. So again, small lot, 6,300 square feet, with the setbacks, the existing setbacks of the house on Tate, the side on Bean, leaves us a very small backyard. So the green line that comes from the house to the sidewalk and then parallel to the sidewalk is what we're requesting to be a 6-foot fence, which would allow some amount of usable backyard as well as visual privacy. It also provides privacy for our back porch, which you can see, as well as the stairs. Those go down to our ADU, the permitted ADU in the basement. So our three real concerns are visual privacy, maximizing some amount of backyard, since we don't have a large lot, and then security. We have had a few folks walk onto the lawn, use the trash cans, and again, that's part of just being downtown. It's a busy area, but those are our concerns. Sean, do you mind going to a couple of the next slides? So the next slide would be just a simple rendering of the proposal, where we have the gate, and instead of the bushes, we would have proposed solid fencing there. This is a picture. This and the next picture are our backyard now. As you can see from the sidewalk, you can see right into the stairwell of the ADU. You can also see on the bottom there that we had already poured the track for the fence, but after talking to our inspector and then talking to Sean, we realized that we were in potential violation, so we have stopped. And the next photo shows from the sidewalk into a backyard, as well as looking onto the porch. So very short distance from the sidewalk to the back porch. This is just a few blocks away at Bayview in Pennsylvania. Very similar 6-foot fence, comes out to the sidewalk and then runs to the home. Very similar to what we were looking for. Here is another fence at the corner of Tate and Bachman. So you have the low 3-foot fence, and then in the background, you can see where it jumps up to 6 feet. I think the next slide shows that a little better. Yeah, so 3 foot in the front, and then it jumps to the 6 foot in the backyard. This is just down the street from us at Tate and Nicholson. Again, the 3-foot fence along the side and in the front, and then it jumps up to the 6 foot on the side yard and then back to the garage. This is across the street from us on Tate and Bean. St. Mary's would be to the right. Under that bush and spider webs is a fence. And then it similarly jumps up to the 6 feet for enclosed side yard and backyard. This is another photo of that particular picture. This photo, St. Mary's, is to the left. This is at the corner of Bean and Masole, another 6-foot fence right on the sidewalk line. And then finally, this one is at the corner of Nicholson and Tate. So that's our presentation. Again, thank you for your time and your consideration.
All right, thank you for your comments, Mr. Baloo. Do commissioners have questions for the appellant at this time? I don't see any hands raised. So at this time, we'll open to the public comments. Members of the public may choose to state your name if you wish to speak, or you may speak anonymously. However, please understand that the meeting is being recorded for public record, and we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this time?
Yes, Chair, we have one hand raised from Ally.
Hi, thank you. I am Ally Miano, and I often attend town meetings in a different capacity. Today, I'm just here as a private citizen and a neighbor because I live across the street on Bean from 103 Tate. And my concerns are with this idea. You know, I noticed the track early on myself. My concerns are twofold. First of all, perhaps for some folks less important, but aesthetically, I looked around the neighborhood and I saw only one driveway with a gate. And it just doesn't seem in keeping with the character of the almond grove. Fenced in houses like you might see in Atherton, where there's nothing but really tall fences and trees. It's just not, the character of the almond grove. It's a much more open and homey feel. But my personal concern is with safety, because over the years, Mrs. Crompton, like myself, a widow, lived in that house. And, we shared things as neighbors, and we would use each other's driveways as needed, if we had to back in. So if I have to back into my driveway to, unload a bunch of Halloween candy or dog food or whatever, I use the driveway on Bean, which is a pretty narrow street. So just to get to my written notes here, to my knowledge, in the almond grove, the only driveway with a gate that butts up to the sidewalk is the one on Massel and Highway 9, right next to that little bank there that used to be a gas station. I can see where somebody living right next to Highway 9 might have some security concerns. And in that case, it's on a much wider street, Massel, which is, definitely wider than Bean. And there's no driveway across the street that, where people might need to use that driveway, for a 3-point turn like I do. So yeah, typically I would pull into that driveway, and then as I'm backing across the street, I can, go slowly and make sure that there's nobody coming, because as my neighbor said, it is a pretty busy area. Indeed, my own cat, was hit by a car on that corner, unfortunately. Sometimes people do come barreling down. I also feel like the photos that were shown, sometimes they were, 3 photos of the same place. And so it's not like there are that many homes. And in those photos, you didn't see driveways blocked. You saw fences that, yes, may be on the side street for that home, but they weren't fences actually blocking driveways that people might need to use sometimes. So that's just what I wanted to express tonight. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you for your comments. Do you have questions? Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you so very much for making your comments. It's always helpful to the Planning Commission, especially to have neighbors speak on the subject. So I wanted to ask your opinion as a neighbor. I heard what you had to say about the driveway and the driveway gate. When I drove around the neighborhood, it did seem that there was a fair number of people that had their backyard protected by 6-foot fences. And even though that's not allowed by our fence ordinance anymore, since that was introduced 2 years ago, but do you have any kind of 6-foot fence on your property? And what is your view of people having their backyards protected by 6-foot fences without the driveway?
That's, I think, rather standard in California. The 6-foot fences I have are all set back, and, my yard is raised. So I think it looks a little more natural and in keeping. In this case as well, I think, you have to consider that this property at one time had a very large side yard, which the homeowner chose to use to, build out his home and add a significant amount of square footage. So, that was a choice that they made to give up some of their terrain and some of their yard that was indeed a private part of the yard, because it was the part that was just shared with a neighbor and not on the street. And now it's all, all house there.
Let me just interrupt you for a moment, Ms. Miano. Commissioner Hanson, did your question?
Yes, my question was answered. Thank you for your comment.
All right. Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any more questions for the speaker? I don't see any hands raised. So are there any other speakers among the public attendees?
There are not, Chair. There's no other hands raised.
All right. So at this time, we're going to invite the appellant to readdress the commission, and you'll have 3 additional minutes to add further comments. Do you wish to speak to us?
Michael, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, Christy and I believe that based on the fences that we've seen around the neighborhood, that what we're asking to do on a small portion of the lot is not a burdensome request. All along the front of the house, 2/3 of the side of the house would all be a 3-foot fence, and only in the backyard portion would we have or request the higher fence. And again, we've shown a few locations around downtown where that exists, and we don't feel that it is that different from some of the existing locations. And that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those additional comments. Do commissioners have questions for the appellant? Yes, Commissioner Thomas and then Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, I did have a question. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so my question really was about what was the fence situation before the remodel, and I know that the fence was built obviously before this ordinance was passed, but what was the fence situation like before the remodel? And is there any way, like, did it comply? Is there any way that you could consider replicating what existed before?
There's at least two sentences.
Ms. Thomas, can you hear me? Okay. There was no existing fence on Tate or Bean. The only existing fences were in the back of the property between our neighbor and then on the side to the other neighbor, but there was no fence to replicate.
All right, thank you for that response. Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, when you were planning the house, Mr. Baloo, were you aware of the setback and height limitations that are in question in the decision of the commission of the planning director?
No, we were not. Hence why we poured that footing in the track. We thought we would be able to do that. And when our inspector was out, he questioned it after we had poured it. That's bad on us. We reached out to Sean, and Sean educated us on what the standards were with regards to location and height. So we paused several months ago when we found out.
Thank you for that response.
Any other questions? I had a question myself, Mr. Baloo. It appears when I'm reading your appeal that there are two issues. There's a difference between what you've got in your appeal and what staff is concerned with in the staff report. One is the privacy and the desire to have a higher fence for your backyard activities. And the second issue is the vehicular gate that would introduce restricted vision on ingress and egress. So my question is, can you, and staff has in the staff report indicated as well that they could not support your request primarily because of the traffic impact, negative traffic impact. So my question to you is, have you considered a privacy fence that would enable the traffic view area to be accommodated, but also give you privacy? In other words, a higher fence set farther back or that complies with the view angles that town would require.
So the vehicular traffic is driven by the existing location of the garage. It's in the back corner, 0 lot line. It's tucked in the back corner, so only one way to get there. So we have prefer a solid fence, but there definitely would be a compromise, whether it's a slatted fence, or we would request that the gate does not have to be 18 feet setback, because it is such a small lot. If you put that gate 18 feet back, it's at least a third of the way into the yard. If there was a compromise of 8 or 10 feet, maybe that would be something that we and the Planning Commission could agree on.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions? Commissioner Thomas?
I do have a question about, and this might be actually, staff might also be able to answer this, but I'm looking at the map or the plan, and it shows the 18-foot vehicular gate setback. And if it is to scale, it looks like it does not actually go a whole third of the way back into your property, Mr. Baloo. So I don't know if that is because it is taken from the edge of the sidewalk. That's where it seems to have been put. And is this the correct? I guess I need staff also to confirm that Exhibit 8 is the correct, like, to scale.
In response, yes, that exhibit was prepared by staff.
Okay.
It's as close to scale as we could get given the limitations we have, but the vehicular gate setback is measured from the edge of the roadway. That's that blue area that extends out to the street area, whereas traditional like building setbacks are measured from the property line, which would in this case be just behind the sidewalk.
Okay. So then I guess that my question for the applicant is, if it was 18 feet from the edge of the street, from the sidewalk, do you feel like that would be reasonable? Not 18 feet into your property?
Yes, that would be better. I don't have that exhibit in front of me.
Great. Because that would mean it would comply. So that's great. Okay.
All right,
that was my only question right now.
All right. Thank you for your question. Do we have any other commissioners who have questions? Commissioner Hanson.
So I just wanted to, I understand your concerns but I wanted you to maybe address the comment that was brought up by Ms. Miano, which is that, well, first of all, we have the fence ordinance that a lot of people have non-compliant fences that are grandfathered because of the timing of when the ordinance came in. But if you're looking at, trying to have the same advantages that your neighbors do, the comment that Ms. Miano made, which is that there is almost no precedent for vehicular gates in the Almond Grove district. And so I'm just wondering why you feel it's important to pursue this, I mean, versus just getting the fence to protect your backyard.
The challenge that we have is that the driveway is a substantial portion of the backyard, where the cards we were dealt with the house in the front and then the garage in the back corner. If you were to put up a fence of any sort, whether it's 6 foot or 3 foot, to put a car in that garage, we'll have to have a vehicular gate. Does that make sense, Mrs. Hanson?
It does. I just wondered if you couldn't just have the fence make a turn before you get to the driveway and run along the back, and then and you could have a door that goes in through the fence. That's where I was thinking. So is that not possible?
To be honest, it's possible, but I think it would be literally less than 10 feet off the back steps.
Because of the small size of the lot.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If we had a lot that went all the way through to the alley, this wouldn't even be a discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments.
Do any other commissioners have questions for the appellant at this time? Seeing none, except Commissioner Thomas.
I do just have one more question, and I just wanted to confirm, Mr. Balu, sorry, that you said that you would be willing to change the type of fence instead of it being solid. Could you maybe share some of your thoughts and opinions on what changes you would be willing to make?
So what we've currently planned was solid, wood, high-end wood slat fence. I would, as a compromise, would be some type of metal rail fence that allows visual. It would be a big compromise from us, because it does allow the security, but then if it's a slotted fence, then the privacy that we're looking for in our backyard, we would give that up completely.
Okay, thank you.
Do commissioners have any further questions? All right, now I don't see hands, and so I will now close the public hearing on this item and ask commissioners if they have questions of staff, wish to comment on the appeal, or introduce a motion for consideration. Commissioner Hanson and then Commissioner Barnett.
I had a question for staff, probably for Parks and Public Works. And I just wanted to make sure I understood the security issue, or the safety issue rather, with the vehicular gate. So what it is that they would have the gate too close to the street versus being set back 18 feet from the curb. And if they did set the gate part of it back 18 feet, then would it be safe from Parks and Public Works perspective?
Good evening, Commissioners. Mike Vroman here, traffic engineer. And yes, to answer your question, is the setback is required so that when they stop to get in or to activate the gate, we want them to be out of the roadway and to keep the sidewalk clear ideally, so that pedestrians don't have to go out in the street or other cars can get by. So that's the safety concern.
And so the 18 feet is the reasonable amount to make sure it's safe that they would clear the sidewalk if there's a vehicle,
Right. Yeah. Most vehicles are 15, 16 feet, but if you have a truck or an SUV, it can be a little longer. So the 18 feet provides satisfactory clearance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so just a follow-up question on that, Mr. Froman. So we really have two safety issues as I read the material. One is when a vehicle is entering the property, which necessitates the 18-foot depth to accommodate a car fully off the street. The second is when a vehicle leaves the property, we've got the triangular view angles on either side. So if we think about a solution that had the fence, the privacy fence running all the way to the street and an 18-foot ingress, we'd still have a problem with the exiting view angle if we didn't have some sort of a kickback on that fence. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The primary concern here is just people traveling up and down the sidewalk. And since it is close to the school, you've got children that are riding their bikes or their scooters or their skateboards. And so we do want, and as pointed out, there are some that don't adhere to this. And that's something we're trying to get on a case-by-case basis.
So again, the view angles are for both the vehicles exiting the property as well as oncoming pedestrians or bicyclists to be able to see a vehicle exiting the property.
Correct.
Or cars for that matter. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Thomas, do you have your hand raised? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Janoff. So I did have a question adding on to that about the driveway view angle. So if there was a 3-foot fence, is that allow for sufficient view? Because that for the driveway view angle and the other side fence that they're proposing. You're muted, sorry.
Thank you, that helps. So generally the 3-foot would be measured. This is a flat lot. So yes, a 3-foot, usually the driver's height, the driver's eye is about 3.5 feet. So a 3-foot fence allows the driver to look over the top and see, and also to be seen.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Comments? Motion? Well, let me just start with some observations and comments. As I've been saying, I think we really have 3 different issues: ingress, egress of the vehicles, and then the privacy desire for the backyard. And while I'm not prepared to introduce a design recommendation, I think that the property owner probably has sufficient resources to design and build something that is quite attractive from a privacy standpoint. It does seem to me that we do need to pull that vehicular access into the property, the required 18 feet. I wouldn't be so concerned about specifically 18 feet if 16 feet were what was requested. However, I think a sufficient distance to get a vehicle off the street makes sense, particularly since Bean is so narrow. And whatever the configuration of the gate or the material of the gate, I'm not prepared to recommend, but I do see I see the safety issue quite clearly as staff has presented it. And so I would support a privacy fence of 6 feet as long as the vehicular safety issues can be addressed. Commissioner Hanson.
So I would agree with everything that Chair Janoff said. I also wanted to comment about the fence ordinance because we had a hearing on this at our last meeting. And, several of us were on the planning commission when the fence ordinance was constructed and then ultimately approved by town council. And so the problem that we have with the fence ordinance is that it has all kinds of good reasons for the things that are put in the fence ordinance. But then it was done in 2019. And so there's all these fences out there that are non-conforming, but grandfathered because they were built prior to 2019, or as Mr. Mullen said, maybe some of them, were constructed without a permit at all. And so, we have the problem about why do we even have a fence ordinance if we're not going to hold anyone to it? And this is a very visible part of town. The downtown is our showcase. So, I don't support the idea of people having big, huge fences blocking everything. But on the other hand, the applicants have a right to, some level of privacy. So where I was going with this is that I see there's big safety concerns with the vehicular gate being constructed the way it is. And I agree with Chair Janoff that, I would be okay with the 6-foot fence simply because of their side yard as well as their front yard abutting the streets and being on a corner lot. I would be okay with that, but I'm not sure that it's compatible with the egress from the driveway. So if there was a way to make that happen with the 6-foot fence, it would be okay, but I'm not sure that that's there yet.
Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Barnett. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. I wanted to say that I share the safety concerns, and with the 6-foot fence, I'm still concerned about the line of sight and the triangles that were demonstrated in the staff report. As I understand, those are important considerations that are not overcome by the fact that there's a small lot. I mean, the choice of a small lot was the owner's decision. And I think that has to be recognized that as Commissioner Hanson said, that we have to have a fence ordinance that's going to be enforced or else it should be changed.
Thank you for those comments. Any other thoughts on the part of commissioners? Commissioner Suzuki.
My thoughts are pretty simple regarding the guidelines and when we should follow it and when we should not. It's when there are exceptional circumstances where it's not replicable across different houses of a typical type. Like, for example, in the last case, we had a case where animals were grazing on a vineyard, right? That's a pretty specific set of circumstances where it requires some sort of physical barrier to prevent that. This case, there doesn't seem to be a physical sort of necessity to have something that basically breaks the guidelines. Those are my simple thoughts on it. I also share the thought of potentially the vehicular gate being a danger if it's constructed. Unless I see some sort of exceptional circumstance, I'm not necessarily in favor of this.
All right, thank you for those comments. And just to clarify, before we get to Commissioner Tabana, what we're looking at is on page 4 or 6 of the staff report, there's a series of exceptions, and these are the ones that we would be looking at to make in order to uphold the appeal. Commissioner Tabana.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. I definitely agree that I think we could find an exception this evening for a special, privacy concern, considering that it's on a corner lot and there's really no real way to have some privacy in your backyard, especially considering Tate and high foot traffic, especially during Halloween and certain months of the year, it gets rather busy there. So to have a private, safe area, I completely understand. However, the safety concern obviously is of concern because of the nature and proximity to the school. So just looking at this, I'm not an expert, but I think we can get a little more creative on the fence and develop a kind of a robust privacy area while still making everybody happy. So maybe I would recommend going back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Commissioner Suzuki.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify my comment when I say I'm not in favor of it. I mean, I'm not in favor of the proposal as is presented, but I understand the need for privacy, and I think that there is room for improvement.
All right, thank you. So a question for staff before I ask for a motion. Can we deny the appeal with regard to the vehicular gate and its setback on the property, but but allow for a taller privacy fence as long as the vehicular safety concerns can be addressed in accommodating that 6-foot fence. Are there two issues on this decision, or are we just simply denying outright?
I think maybe Director Paulson can weigh in on this.
Sure, thank you. So I think it's been brought up, the potential to, come back with potentially a revised version that maybe has fewer exceptions. As you mentioned, specifically addressing the vehicular access with the distance to the gate location, and then maintaining that driveway site triangle as shown in Exhibit 8. But then for a small portion, there may be something that's appropriate for a 6-foot fence, which would be an exception. So it is possible to grant the exception with the understanding that the vehicular issues will get addressed, but you are allowing the potential for 6-foot fence to be placed in the traffic view area, which I believe is the other exception.
Thank you. That clarifies it well for me. Commissioner Thomas.
I also understand the concern for privacy, but that is not one of the reasons that we can grant an exception. So I don't particularly feel comfortable voting to approve this to move ahead until I see like a better alternative plan that doesn't have as many exceptions personally, but I could be convinced otherwise.
I just wanted to point out that the list of exceptions, exception D, does indicate a special security concern. Privacy is not, as you say, not part of this list, but security is. Commissioner Hanson.
I wanted to follow up on Chair Janoff's question. So, I mean, as it stands right now, the proposal, from what I'm hearing, we haven't voted yet, but from what I hear from the comments from the commission, that the proposal as it stands right now is not acceptable, that we could uphold the appeal and grant the exceptions. So if I understood Director Paulson's comments, we could grant the appeal with basically them going back to the drawing board to with allowing some level of 6-foot fence as long as it didn't have the vehicular gate issues? Or is it better to deny the appeal and tell them they need to go back and work with staff to come up with something that's better? I'm just trying to understand what's the best alternative between the two.
So I won't say it's the best alternative, but I would say the most beneficial alternative to the applicant would not be to deny the appeal, have them come back with something that still is going to require an exception that we may still not be able to support on the 6-foot fence perspective, which brings it back to the Planning Commission. I think two options would be, as I think has been mentioned by commissioners, continue it for, to the next meeting, have them bring back a revised proposal that addresses as many of the exceptions as possible, or grant the appeal in part and state that you're comfortable with the 6-foot fence in a similar configuration along Bean and then back to the house, so that return, but they would have to maintain the site view, the driveway view triangle, and set the gate back 18 feet from the edge of the roadway. So those are the two paths I see as potential. And so it'll be up to the commission as to which one they feel is most appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Could I have commissioners' comments and thoughts? Yes, Commissioner Suzuki, about which way to proceed.
I wanted to ask about exception D, a special security concern. Commissioner Tavana earlier brought up the idea that it's a corner lot, there's Halloween, it's near the school. Like, do any of these count as special security concerns, or is there something else, some threshold that it has to meet in order to be considered special?
I would say that's ultimately in the eye of the decision maker, because it's a pretty fine line, privacy and security there, frankly. It doesn't say security, but that privacy, and a 6-foot fence also is going to provide added security. So it really is up to, in the case where they initially apply, it's up to staff and the community development director as to whether we see a special security issue, if that's the reasoning they're using for or to justify the exception. And then when it gets to the planning commission, you have the freedom to interpret that. We don't have a definition of what a special security challenge is. So there's not a definition of that in the code. So there is some room for interpretation.
Commissioner Hanson.
Given what Director Paulson said, I do also think it is possible to consider E, which is a special circumstance, including lot size or configuration where strict enforcement of these regulations would result in an undue hardship. And so because this has come up in a previous hearing with the corner lot, that we don't have a case defined in the exceptions for a corner lot. And so in my view, if we were to go down the path of allowing the 6-foot fence minus with the idea that it would comply with all the vehicular issues on the driveway, that we could do it under E.
All right, Commissioner Thomas.
I hear what Commissioner Hanson is saying. And when I first went through all of this, I definitely noted and asked, is this an undue hardship? And it's really difficult for me to make that finding. One, because is it an undue hardship? But two, because of the reconstruction of the property owners chose to buy this property and then build a space on it. And now they're saying there's an undue hardship because they can't enjoy their backyard with the ordinance. And it's they made those decisions since the ordinance has been in place. And I fully understand they did not know. And that's quite unfortunate that they were unaware of the restrictions. So I don't think it was with malicious intent, but that is difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around and say, oh, this qualifies as an undue hardship when you're buying a corner lot across from St. Mary's 2 blocks away from downtown. It's you knew where you were buying your property, right? So that is just difficult for me in general, not just with this case, but overall. So
let me just pause discussion for Commissioner Tabana. What I'm hearing is that we are comfortable with some extent of 6-foot fence to accommodate the privacy desire, and we are requiring the appellant to go back and address the vehicular safety issues. So the question, and perhaps this is for staff, is do we need to make a finding for the exception of a portion of the 6-foot fence from the code section 29.40-0320 in order to move this along with allowing some form of 6-foot fence?
I think the planning commission can be clear in, yes, making the finding for specific segment that you find amenable, and then making also clear of the portions that you would want to see meet the code. So in this case, it sounds like the vehicular gate and preservation of the driveway view triangle is important, but there is some momentum behind allowing some 6-foot fencing outside of those areas to help create some private area.
That's what I'm hearing from fellow commissioners, and I think I'm seeing some heads nod. My question then is, if we go down that path, would the motion need to include one of the exceptions that code section asks for? And I see Director Paulson is nodding his head.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So if we look at what we have in front of us, we are looking at security concerns, and we've had discussion that says this doesn't meet that standard, or special circumstance regarding lot size or configuration. It would appear to me that those are the only 2 exceptions that we would have at our discretion. Commissioner Tabana.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for staff in terms of when this architectural and site application plan was submitted. Was the fence ordinance already in place?
So Thank you. The plans for the house and the improvements to the residence and the garage were submitted some time ago and separate. Those plans did not include any fencing on them as it's not required to include fencing. This request, as outlined by the property owner, was brought on by the inspector's visit and seeing the track for the gate installed. And then the property owner contacted me and we walked through the regulations and the process. And that's what got us here today. That occurred after the fence ordinance of 2019 became effective.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thomas.
I personally would, if I heard staff right, I would feel most comfortable with offering or voting for a continuance so that the property owners could come back with a different design. And then I think that with that different design, the special circumstance I think that we could find E with the lot size and configuration. It's a special circumstance because that lot was split at some time. So there is no access through the back like the rest of these properties. It does make it a little bit smaller of a lot and only accessible from those, from Bean and Tate. So I would say that perhaps results as a special circumstance under E.
So just to follow up on that suggestion, it's my understanding that if we are still going to entertain a 6-foot fence at all, we're going to need to find one of those exceptions as applicable. So whether we have a continuance today or we make a decision today about what we're approving and what we are finding an exception for, I think we're at the same place. And I'm not sure how the other commissioners feel. I'm not sure continuance is warranted on this, but I'm open to hearing other comments. Commissioner Hanson.
So my thinking on this is that this is really a call by Parks and Public Works to bring us into compliance, and that if we grant the exception, as long as they can address all the concerns of Parks and Public Works, there's really no reason to bring them back to the Planning Commission to have us review this again, because we're not the experts in safety and security. And so I'm not sure, what that would do. So if we do feel comfortable that we could grant the 6-foot exception, subject to them addressing all the safety concerns of Parks and Public Works, I would prefer to just grant the appeal and send them to Parks and Public Works to make it work. And if they can't resolve it, then it could come back to us. But to put them back in front of the Planning Commission for this, when we're not the experts in security, I don't think that's the best way to go. That's my 2 cents.
So that sounds like a pretty well-constructed motion. If you would care to frame that as one, Commissioner Hanson, I think that might be helpful for us.
I can do that. So I'm going to grant the appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to deny a fence height exception for construction of a 6-foot tall vehicular gate and fencing within the required street setbacks. And I'm going to skip through all the rest of the description of that. The only finding that's on Exhibit 2 is the finding for CEQA, and I don't see an issue with CEQA. However, we do need to find an exception that to the fence ordinance, which I think we thought that we could use E, which is a special concern because of their lot configuration. However, the exception that we're granting is only for the 6-foot fence, and that's only to the extent that they can satisfy all the concerns of Parks and Public Works and requirements for vehicular access and egress from the driveway, and including site. And then if there's terms and conditions do we need terms and conditions from Exhibit 3, staff?
Yes, those are presented in case you wanted to grant the appeal.
So, including the terms and conditions in Exhibit 3.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Tavana.
I'll second that.
All right, any other comments or thoughts for the maker and seconder of the motion? Commissioner Barnett.
I have a concern that we're delinking this fence height and the safety issues. And I'm not sure that they can, seems like they're inextricably linked. So I have a concern about granting the appeal when we don't know whether the 6-foot fence can be met. Maybe the maker of the motion, Commissioner Hanson, can explain whether that's part of the motion, that the safety issues have to be addressed regardless of the height of the fence.
Yes,
That was part of the
that was,
motion.
Okay,
yes, that
thank
was
you for that clarification.
Yeah.
yeah,
it's-
and it might not be, and I have full understanding that that may not be possible. But you know, I like I said earlier, making a continuance doesn't make sense for me because this is an issue of Parks and Public Works. So they do need to satisfy the requirements of Parks and Public Works, regardless of anything that we've granted tonight.
So just to clarify, that's the priority on the motion, and the 6-foot fence is sort of a secondary okay, as long as the Park and Public Works requirements can be satisfied. Does that assuage your concerns, Commissioner Barnett?
It does perfectly.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing no hands raised, I'll call a question. Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Devana,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Yes,
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Suzuki,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion passes. Director Paulson, are there appeal rights?
There are appeal rights, Chair. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision to the Town Council. Forms are available online and at Town Hall. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
All right, thank you for that. So we are now moving on to item 4 and requesting Vice Chair Birch to rejoin our hearing. Item 4 is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a formula retail business with alcohol sales and tasting, and including 24-hour delivery, BevMo, on property zoned CH, located at 636 Blossom Hill Road, APN 529-16047 and 529-16054. Conditional use permit U21-016. Property owner Blossom Hill Pavilion, LP. Applicant Greg Endem, Beverages and More Incorporated. Project planner Aaron Walters. Are there any disclosures? And may I have a show of, yes, Commissioner Barnett.
I know David Yee, I'm acquainted with him, and he had some correspondence in the package with staff. And I think I can make a fair and objective decision in the matter, regardless of that acquaintanceship.
Thank you so much for that disclosure. And now may I have a show of hands of commissioners who have viewed the property? Thank you. I understand Ms. Walters will be giving the staff report tonight.
Yes, thank you and good evening, commissioners. The applicant, BevMo, is requesting an approval for a conditional use permit for a formula retail business located at 636 Blossom Hill Road. The vacant tenant space is located within the Blossom Hill Pavilion Shopping Center at the corner of Blossom Hill and Los Gatos Boulevard. The conditional use permit is required for formula business retail over 6,000 square feet. The 11,200 square foot tenant space was formerly occupied by the formula retail business Pier 1 Imports. The applicant is requesting to operate store hours between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. 7 days a week. The business proposes selling alcohol products, gourmet food, and other related items. The business proposes on-site alcohol tasting on limited days and proposes to provide a 24-hour delivery of products. Alcohol deliveries would be limited to 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. The proposed use complies with the town's parking requirements. No traffic study or traffic mitigation fee is required for the town's traffic policy for changes of uses within existing shopping centers. The applicant's public outreach and letters of support for the project can be found in Exhibits 6 and 7. There is a desk item tonight that includes a public comment not supporting the project found in Exhibit 10. The addendum includes a petition of support provided by the applicant, which can be found in Exhibit 9. This addendum also includes a request from the applicant to modify Condition 6. This would specify that deliveries be described as merchandise deliveries, and also to modify that merchandise delivery hours from midnight to 8 a.m.
So based on this analysis from the staff report, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit subject to the recommended conditions of approval included in Exhibit 4 with that modified language for condition of approval number 6. So this concludes staff's presentation. There are representatives from Public Works here this evening to also assist in answering any questions. Thanks.
Thank you for your staff report. And do commissioners have questions for Ms. Walters or staff at this time? Commissioner Hanson.
The applicant has and gave justification for why they wanted to do it for having their hours until 11 p.m. And I know we have some relatively newer commissioners, and they may know this, but the CUP runs with the land, and so 11 p.m. is rather late for every night of the week, or at least here in Los Gatos. And my question is, do we have other CUPs for similar retail or food establishments or whatnot that go until 11 o'clock every day of the week?
That's a great question, and I'd have to ask Mr. Paulson to speak on behalf of that.
Okay.
That is a great question. I'm sure that we have some other grocery stores that go till that late. Safeway comes to mind, but I can't confirm that. I can try to look at their CUP as we're moving forward, and I think the applicant can provide additional justification while we're looking that up, and then we'll be prepared to answer that when we come back to Planning Commission discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this time? I don't see any hands raised, so we'll now open the public hearing and give the applicant up to 5 minutes to address the commission.
Yeah, so the applicant has her hand raised. You now are able to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Director. Chair Janoff, Commissioners, my name is Greg Endem. I oversee the development for BevMo, and I'm here tonight to present our proposed project at Blossom Hill Pavilion. I'm not going to go into all the details of the project. I think the staff report and all the attachments were very thorough. I will go through a few key points and then be happy to address Commissioner Hanson's question on hours, as well as some information on other operations in this town that do operate extended hours. BevMo, you may or may not know, we've been around for 25 years, and since day one, we've set the gold standard for being an alcohol retailer. We have worked since our founding to have very high standards and maintain those and distinguish ourselves different from the old quote unquote liquor store. We do that with our hiring practices. We don't hire anyone under 21. We could hire people over 18, but we choose not to eliminate some of the peer pressure. We don't carry products of abuse. We don't sell lottery tickets, magazines, newspapers, pornography, or anything that would inhibit loitering, because that's not what we're about. We're a specialty beverage retailer, and we want to provide a clean and well-lit and pleasant shopping environment. We limit access to the store to anyone under 21. You can't shop in our store unless you're with a parent or guardian if you're underage. And we have continually updating our age verification protocols so that we ensure that the dreaded sale to minor doesn't happen. And we have our own secret shopper program that we shop our own employees for that purpose and make sure we're maintaining our standards. All these have really led to us being, setting the gold standard for the California ABC. And we hear this a lot. My main job is to present to bodies like yourself new locations. And I hear this from police groups and law enforcement all the time, that they are very comfortable with our operation because of our standards. And again, here we see that we don't have any objection from your police department as well. The location, I actually looked at this location 4 or 5 years ago and it was not available. There was another tenant that came in and out, but we find that we have 9,000 customer visits that go to the Camden store, which is down the road about 5 to 8 minutes. So clearly we that live in zip code 95032. I didn't even look at the other Los Gatos zip codes, but clearly there is a large percentage of town residents that are shopping in our store outside the town. So that was a real eye opener for us. We don't see that often. We're not proposing any changes to the exterior of the building other than building a slight screen wall for the shopping carts. You may or may not know about our store, but we have a large offering of wines, beers, and spirits. And recently we've expanded that to be more inclusive of food, toiletries, household goods, over-the-counter medicines, and even rapid COVID tests. We were recently merged with a company called Go Brands, which their expertise was in a 30-minute delivery process. And they have a lot of systems and processes that allow from when an order is placed online that you will have the goods in your hand within 30 minutes. And that's done by having a very strict controlled delivery area. So we limit our orders for a particular store to a 13-minute drive time around the store to ensure that we can serve and honor that 30-minute commitment that we make. The drivers we use the same training and certification for the drivers that we use for store employees. Compliance is our number one objective because aside from continuing to be a responsible beverage retailer, if a driver who is not an employee delivers something to a minor, it goes against our license. So it's a concern and something we really focus on. As part of the approval process, we reached out to all the residents adjacent to the site as well as the commercial property owners. Because of COVID, I usually hold neighborhood meetings in person, but because of this, I did it via the letter, and I did have some conversations with email with Mr. Yu, who lives across on Blossom Hill Road. That correspondence was included in your packet. And then also we have done the required mailing that the state of California requires for new licenses to all the residents in the area. And during that process, no objections were received from anyone concerning our proposed licenses.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second, Director Paulson. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, that's time.
All right. Thank you. I'm afraid you've run out of time, Mr. Andem, but do commissioners have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Hanson.
I have two questions. One is if you could answer my previous question about the hours, because I didn't know if you were aware that when our CUPs run with the land, so that anyone, if Vmpt went somewhere else, would be able to stay open until 11 o'clock if they had a similar use. So if you can answer that question. And then I also wanted you to comment on how it is that you prevent, since this location is close to an elementary school and a middle school, very, very close, and those kids frequent that shopping center, how it is, do you have someone at the door making sure that no one comes in? Because you don't have that at the Camden facility that I've seen. I'm one of the 9,000 people.
Yes, Commissioner. Number one, the hours that proposing 7 to 11 are, I don't want to say they're misleading. We propose that to simplify the application. The majority of the year, let's say January to maybe the week or so before Halloween, the hours will typically be 8 or 9 in the morning till probably 9 at night. But at holiday time, that's when we pay the rent. And so the business, like most shopping retailers, grows. And we find on certain days, not every day, perhaps the day or two before Thanksgiving, the day or two before Christmas, before New Year, we might open at 7 or 8. And we might, on certain days of those weeks that lead up to those major holidays, we may stay open till 10 or 11. So rather than try to fashion a matrix of this variety of hours, depending on what day of the year it is, we've distilled it down to ask for 7 to 11. Now, we firmly understand that that might be a concern. And if it is, we can go and break all those times out into groups, which is how the company started its history. Is if I look through our old use permits, we have many different hours depending upon what day of the year or what month it is. So that's why the hours are proposed as such. And Commissioner Hanson, I'll answer your question about the children as well, but just to comment on other retailers in town, there are 4 other businesses in town that I was able to locate that operate 24 or open 24 hours and also offer delivery 24 hours. Those are 2 Safeway stores and 2 7-Eleven stores. With regards to the children, this is something I've actually got into kind of a verbal fisticuffs with planning commissioners, because she was very upset, one in San Francisco, that I was going to let her kid come in and purchase one of our 25 kinds of root beer that we offer. But we don't do that. You have to be with a parent or guardian, or we will escort you out of the store if we see that you are coming in. Our stores are just not designed or intended for people under 21. And that's just how we operate. And we do have, this is a 11,000 square foot store. There will be somebody at the cash register pretty much all the hours that the store is open, which is by the door. And they will not, if they attempt to come in, we will ask them to leave. So that's that. And we post that on the door as part of our kind of informational signage.
And have you had experience in other locations where you've been this close to a school and where that's been successful? Because I'm quite sure that the kids will try and come in there. They're going to go to Jamba Juice and Starbucks and whatnot. They'll try and wander into your place too.
Yes, we've actually, I was actually present in a center where there was a school in the center. And so the employees just are very much on guard for that very event. And that's something that's really in our DNA about, along with the many other things that we do and we don't sell, is we strictly enforce that. They're not our customer. I hate to say that, it might sound callous, but for the most part, we are an adult beverage store. And so our employees are trained, and that's one of the focus items, along with, asking for the right ID. And when anybody looks under 50, we try to enforce that and ask for ID for those people. So.
Okay, you answered my question. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and we'll probably have an opportunity to ask the applicant more questions, but at this time, Vice Chair Birch, did you want to pursue?
No, it's okay. I can wait till after.
Okay. All right, I don't mean to cut anybody off if it's urgent. So, all right, so at this time, if there are no further questions from the commission, we'll open up public comments and invite members of the public to address the commission on this agenda item. And we ask that you state your name and address. You may speak anonymously, but as I said before, this meeting is being recorded for public record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this time?
Thank you, Chair. I don't see any members of the public with their hand raised. Let's give it a minute. I see no hand raised, Chair.
All right, so we'll invite the applicant to return to the Planning Commission, and at this time, address any concerns or additional comments you'd like to make. And then, of course, commissioners will have their last opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. So, Mr. Endem.
Yes, Commissioner Janoff, I really don't have, I want to be here as a resource for you and your fellow commissioners. So I am pleased with the community support that has been shown for the proposed location, the letters of support, as well as the signatures on the petition of town residents. And I would just ask for your approval, but I'm really here to answer your questions. So let me be quiet and do that.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Birch.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask a bit about the delivery portion of the proposal. I see on here that it has a 24-hour delivery. You've estimated between 50 to 100 deliveries per day, and I assume that's in addition to shoppers. Do all of your stores offer 24-hour delivery?
We recently, about a year ago, merged with the company Go Brands.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we have rolled out of our 161 stores that we have nationwide, which is California, Washington, and Arizona. We implemented this in 114. And
sorry, go ahead.
And so we have about 114 that have been operating with the extended delivery hours starting back from January of 2021.
Okay. If it's all right, Chair, if I just ask a couple other associated, I know you have another site close by, the Camden site. Does it offer delivery, 24-hour delivery?
No, and the reason is that store is going to be closed within the next year. The owner of the center is planning a major renovation that will demolish all the buildings on site. And we have been on borrowed time, for lack of a better word, for 2 or 3 years. And there is a substantial investment that's made when we implement the 24-hour or the extended hour delivery, and we elected not to do it there as one, I think, the only stores in our San Jose market, partly because we were pursuing this location. If we weren't pursuing this location, we still wouldn't do it there because it's going to be going away soon.
That makes sense. Can I ask how much time you have actually spent on the site during the daytime?
I have been there probably at any time from 6 a.m. in the morning till noon, maybe a dozen times. And I know the parking lot is challenging.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's in addition to that, what I was going to, you probably need to spend some time there as school lets out. You have 2 schools, very, very close proximity, and also the high school by about 2 o'clock. Sometimes it's 12:30, depending on the day they let out on. That place is mobbed with kids, absolutely mobbed. And when I hear 50 to 100 deliveries a day, and these are contract drivers that are going to be trying to get in, pick it up, deliver, and get back as fast as possible through that particular lot, I have a lot of concerns about the safety on that corner. It's not an easy corner to navigate via traffic anyways, the way it has access onto the roads. And I'd really like to understand what your vision is for how these drivers are coming in and out. Is there dedicated parking for them? Because I did see, and I appreciate staff making sure that pickups weren't allowed to be done on either Blossom Hill or the Boulevard. That would be even worse, but I have a lot of concerns about the safety of this in that parking lot and the kids. And I'd be curious how you guys plan to mitigate that.
Sure. Commissioner Janoff or Chair Janoff, if I can respond.
Yes, please.
the 50 estimated 50 to 100 orders is an optimistic number. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but we find that the bulk of the orders and the demand comes after 7 in the evening and before midnight-ish. Now, we get some orders after midnight, and hence that's why we've asked for the 24-hour. I will tell you again that probably initially we'll only do till 3:30 in the morning, because it takes a while for the customer base to really embrace and understand that there's this option. But during the day, between when we open, whether it's 8 or 9 to after dinner time, that is not our peak time for deliveries. And I appreciate the children and the traffic, but I don't think that's when you're going to see the drivers at the peak. It's going to be after the evening meal, when people are entertaining, when they run out of something and they just don't want to get in their car again and go to the store. And that's when our service really makes itself a valuable resource to the community.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That question, Commissioner Hanson.
I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on Vice Chair Birch's line of questioning. So the parking situation there is very challenging, as you already have noted. And it's pretty bad on the weekends and in the afternoons, and when school's out and whatnot. So this comes into compliance with our parking regulations, but we do it based on square footage. It doesn't, and that is the way that we do it, but it doesn't factor in how many people are going to be there at any given time. So did I understand on the drawings that you are dedicating 2 parking spaces or more to deliveries, and they won't be used for anything else? Or how's that going to work? I mean, if someone else was parking there when you needed to make the delivery, how do you handle that? So could you just explain a little bit about that?
Sure. We're not going to have any exclusive to BevMo spaces, but we will have, we've identified 3 spaces against the fence that will be 5-minute parking, because our drivers are not there. They are there to pick up an order and deliver an order, and they're not loitering, hanging out. There's no need or methodology that causes them to be at the store. And so they are, for lack of a better word, summoned electronically when an order is ready. They will come to the store, they're verified who they are, they're given the order, and they're on their way. And so 3 spaces with a 5-minute parking time limit is more than ample to handle the driver load. And in the evenings after 7, when there are more orders, most of the other businesses have slowed down in their demand for parking. And so the lot is more open as well at that time.
So what you're saying though is, so I understand that. So what you're saying though is that there basically are 3 dedicated spaces, because the use of 5-minute parking, I'm trying to imagine what it would be, because you can't go into Starbucks and be in and out of there in 5 minutes. Or Jamba Juice or any place else. So I mean, what would other people be able to use those spots for if they're designated as 5-minute parking?
It's a great question. I don't have an answer for you. I agree with your analysis, but we were trying to create a easier way to have a place for the drivers during the day. And then, the mail person might drop off mail if they drive onto the lot and drop mail off. I didn't prepare for that answer.
Okay, well, that's definitely something that we need to get worked out. And I think you have to clear that through Parks and Public Works. I'm not sure, but in any case, that's definitely something that should be figured out.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Thomas.
My comment is about the parking. It's not a question for the applicant, so I can wait.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Barnett?
I have two unrelated questions. The first one relates, the easy one relates to signage. I didn't see a proposed sign simulation on the plans. Can you tell me, would that be equivalent to the Pier 1, or do you have other plans?
It would be very similar to the Pier 1. We have a proposal that has a sign that says Bevmo, where the Pier 1 letters were on either side of the building, and then a panel on the monument that's on Blossom Hill.
I see. The other question is, since you're bringing up the total required parking spaces to 107 out of 109 provided, do you know whether handicap parking is being accommodated?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Do any other commissioners have questions for the applicant? I don't see any hands raised. So I will now close the public hearing and ask if any commissioners have questions of staff, wish to comment on the application, or introduce a motion for consideration. Vice Chair Birch.
The question for staff has to do with trips currently at the facility. When Pier 1 was in, do you guys have an average of daily trips that were associated with Pier 1? An estimated number?
So Ms. Walters' camera isn't working right now, but I will say we do not keep track of trips for individual businesses. It's based on the center and the square footage. So
Okay.
irrespective of how popular or unpopular a business is, we don't keep track of those numbers.
That's what I figured. So my follow-up was, what do you guys calculate, at least maybe currently, for the center?
It's calculated as shopping center, which is, hold on one second. See if I can find.
We do also have staff from Parks and Public Works who may be able to provide additional details.
Yes,
So
I
shopping
apologize.
center.
Oh, go ahead, Joel.
So shopping center, and Mr. Broman can correct me, this is a little bit older version, is somewhere around 43 average daily trips per 1,000 square feet.
1,000 square feet. Okay. And the overall shopping center is about how many square feet?
We don't have that data. I'm
Okay.
not sure if Mr. Broman has it.
I can probably find it. And if I can ask one other question that just had to do with the parking before I forget.
Yeah.
We were talking about that 5-minute parking designated. Who monitors that? Yeah, typically it's something that's kind of written into an overall type of a lease, but that a landlord, a tenant, a town, who monitors those?
That would be a landlord tenant issue. It's private property. So the police aren't going to be monitoring that. The staff is not going to be monitoring that. So they'll have to control that.
That's what I figured. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Tavana.
Yeah, I have a question for staff in terms of the CUP and kind of how it would look. So what's being proposed is a 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. CUP. Is that the way I'm understanding it? But then how does a 24-hour delivery, there'll still be workers there thereafter? I'm wondering, what are we approving tonight? It seems to be a 24-hour almost use CUP in my opinion, as opposed to a 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. So if you could just clarify how the 24-hour delivery will entail or tie into the CUP, that would be great.
So Ms. Walters, if you can unmute yourself, you can do that. Looks like you might be having trouble with Zoom. You can drop off and maybe drop back on. But obviously the hours of the store being open are the 7 to 11 as proposed. And then yes, there will be someone there to provide the goods to the delivery drivers who will be leaving, picking that up and delivering them. So it is a 24-hour business, but it's not open 24 hours like some of the other businesses we have in town that were mentioned, which are 2 of the 3 Safeways in town. I believe Walgreens is open 24 hours a day. So, you know, there's a number of other operations that the store is physically open 24 hours a day, but this store will not be open 24 hours a day, only the delivery option.
I have a follow-up question to that then. So with us approving the CUP from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., we have no ability to comment on the 24-hour use tonight?
You, of course, can comment on any aspect of the application.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Commissioner Devano, we do have under condition 5 of the conditions of approval, they're enumerating the different time bands that those hours will be used for. And we certainly have the opportunity to refine that if it's the will of the commission to do so. So if there's a particular concern or area that you'd like to see addressed, then don't hesitate to let us know. Vice Chair Birch, yeah.
The other stores that you mentioned that are open 24 hours, do you know if they do 24-hour delivery? I know a lot of that has changed since COVID. So are they doing some of the same type of services?
I know they do delivery. I would have to go online and Google it to see if
I can do
whether
that.
Walgreens, the Safeways, the 7-Elevens, you know, we can try to look at that as the commission discusses.
I can do it too. So, just curious.
Commissioner Thomas?
I think that all of those locations are going to have some sort of third-party delivery service, whether or not it's like actually run through Safeway or Walgreens. I'm not sure, but I know that I'm pretty sure you can use things like Postmates and DoorDash 24 hours to those locations, which is just like a worker. I mean, it's still the same concept, except I guess there's like a less liability for the store itself. So I don't really know if that should be taken. I don't know. I just think that it's probably, yes, you can get stuff delivered in town 24 hours from a store in town.
So I'm afraid I'm not getting a good read on what commissioners' concerns or I hear a lot of questions about delivery and parking. Do we have any areas that you want to change the conditions of approval or have further discussion? Commissioner Hanson, Vice Chair Birch, and Commissioner Thomas, in that order.
Okay, so I just wanted to comment first of all that I think echoing what was said by the applicant, that I would concur that, you know, BevMo is a very well-run company for the business that they're in. They're not at all a liquor store. I've been in their Camden location multiple times, and they carry a lot of specialty things that you wouldn't find anything place else. The place is very clean. The employees are very knowledgeable and well-trained. And either you don't see any people loitering around the store. And in fact, I never saw the store very crowded on Camden. So I think it's not it's definitely a good business for this location, but there are concerns about the parking and the schools being nearby and whatnot. But they are certainly covered by our town's parking requirements. So I think the devil gets into some of the details about like the parking for the delivery people and stuff that needs to have a little bit more work put into it. I would also say that pursuant to what I said earlier about the CUP running with the land, if I were to recommend approval of this CUP, that I would prefer to have the hours be what we really actually expected it to be. With the exception of the holidays, it would be, you know, a bigger interval. So I would want to modify the conditions of approval to be that.
Okay, so modified conditions of approval with respect to hours. I think there's some agreement around that. Vice Chair Birch?
Yeah, I just still have some concerns too about the 24-hour delivery through there, the number of proposed deliveries, and just the overall setup of the parking. I think to me, it's just more of a safety concern through there. Just having had kids that spend a lot of time there who have almost been hit by multiple cars through there anyway, just having drivers, spinning through there feels concerning. I also wonder if it's not overly congesting a specific spot in town with somewhat similar style of stores. We've got Rite Aid, Whole Foods, CVS, Lenardi's, and then we'll have this, and it feels very congested in that area. And I'm wondering if, in fact, one of our conditions is that it's, desirable. Is it the right location? I think that's just more of a question I would have for my other commissioners.
Commissioner Thomas?
I kind of have a question and a comment. I do think that I understand I understand Commissioner Birch, what you were saying about how that area is congested. I'm just not entirely sure. Like, I feel like we could just say that with a lot of businesses though. And so I don't know. We also want retail space to be filled right now. Like, in a way, I was very excited to see that there was a retail spot that wanted to be filled by a business in our town, because I know retail is really hurting. And I know that that's more towards downtown, but I do think that I'm wondering what other business might actually be able to go there and do well there. It is a shopping area. It would be great if we could improve walkability, so we could have people walking across the street, going to, if you're going to Lenardi's and also going to Bevmo, you could just walk across the street instead of get back into your car and have to drive to the other parking area. That being said, I think that I don't see as many issues with the parking personally, because it meets the parking requirements. And I don't have a major concern with a couple of 5-minute spots, because I completely disagree that you can't go to Starbucks or Jamba Juice or Chipotle in 5 minutes, because I would argue that there's a lot of people that don't go to those locations because you can't actually order online, park quickly, and then go in and grab your drink and leave, which is a very common way to order things from Jamba Juice and Starbucks these days. I don't think I'd go to either of those stores ever, actually, but without actually just ordering it in advance, personally, if I was in that position. Chipotle also does have 10-minute parking for pickup already. So I don't think that it's also fair for us to say that, I don't know, to take that into account when, I'm kind of curious about how Chipotle, how the Chipotle situation ended up being, because that is right next to an urgent care and they do have 10-minute parking. I think it's 10 minutes, but still, it's still very limited parking for pickup. So those are kind of my thoughts around parking. I do know that it can be a very busy area with regards to the after school time and school safety. That definitely is a concern, the pedestrian safety. I am wondering how much we can take into account about how the business operates and runs when we are granting a CUP, because as in the conditional use permit, runs with the land. And so we need to review the application based on the use described instead of the business model. So I kind of am struggling to know where we draw the line and what we consider. And I'm looking for some guidance. I know that was a lot, so thank you for all of it.
Any other comments? Questions? Commissioner Barnett?
We do have the equivalent of a matrix that Mr. Endem referred to with the Hillbrook School. And I think in view of the fact that this is going to run with the land, that we should take advantage of figuring out date times and or date sequences where there might be additional hours or more reduced hours. I'm not too hopeful that that would solve the parking problem, but I think it might help us in the future with respect to a future applicant.
So you're suggesting that we have some sort of a traffic monitoring report along the lines of what we're asking of Hillbrook?
The
I'm not clear.
concept is that the hours would vary depending on whether it's a holiday season or not, for
I
example.
see, yeah. Yeah, I am in favor of expanding the condition that outlines the hours of operation to make it more specific to what Mr. Endem actually described as their expected business, so that we are essentially approving a 9 to 9 retail operation, and then on certain dates, which can be the month beginning before Thanksgiving and going through January 1st, which is what the applicant has described. I'm comfortable expanding the hours on that time frame or even more specific days. But I agree that that's a reasonable modification to that condition. Commissioner Devana.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. Just in general, I support this project. I agree with Commissioner Hanson and you, Commissioner Janoff, or Chair Janoff, that modifying the hours would be beneficial for this, especially given the location. So clearly delineate that in the CUP process. But overall, I don't have any other major concerns. I think traffic is beyond my specialty here. I just in general, without anything being there is cars flying in and out of that parking lot. So it is a constraint on that. With regard to children, coming by after school and so forth, I don't know if the concern about the commission is that just kids being around alcohol or not. But if that is the case, they can walk into a grocery store. There's alcohol aisles there. They can walk up and down. So I don't have any special concern in that regard. But if I don't know what the right hours are, but I was thinking maybe just an 8 to 10 kind of envelope it with the assumption it'll be a 9 to 9 hours for operation. And then maybe during the holidays, 7 to 11 for the CUP, just so they can be open a little bit earlier. But that was my general thoughts there.
And perhaps what we would like to do is define which holidays so that it's clear that it's the Thanksgiving through New Year's Day period. Commissioner Hanson?
I wanted to echo what Commissioner Thomas said. I think we have to remember that retail is in a very bad way, and this site could remain vacant for a very long time, trying to find something that could work. And this is a very well-run company, and so I think we have to have faith in our process, and that we have parking regulations which they're meeting. I think we have to take all that in consideration, and and so I'm generally in favor. Mine is modifying the hours with going ahead with us, and and also giving them the guidance that they need to work out a little bit on the parking. But I'm okay with them doing that with their landlord and Parks and Public Works to the extent needed.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, and I think it does make a difference when your corporation is partnered or you've joined corporations with your delivery service versus using a third party. That means that the delivery effectiveness and the safety issues are really directly tied to your doorstep. And so I think that's it might be an area that gives us a little more comfort in terms of safety. Yeah. So those are all great comments, good deliberation. Do I have a commissioner who's ready to make a motion? Commissioner Hanson.
Unless someone else wants to do it, I will make a motion to approve conditional use permit to allow formula retail business with alcohol sales and tasting, including 24-hour delivery, which is BevMo, on property zone CH APN 529-16-647 and 529-16-054. Property owner Blossom Hill Pavilion LP, applicant Greg Enum Beverages and More Incorporated. And this is subject to the conditions of approval that are in Exhibit 3, with the exception of we want to modify the hours of operation to be what the applicant expected, roughly 9 to 9 I have a question for staff before I finish the motion, which is, do we have to specify the details, or can we leave it to, we want it modified to be 9 to 9 with the exception of the holiday season, and then have the details worked out? I'm asking staff, do we need to be more specific?
If you would like to be more specific, that's fine. If you would like us to work with the applicant and define that in the conditional use permit, we can do that as well.
Okay, I'm going to start with that. I would leave it to staff to work it out with the applicant, but if, and I'll make that my motion, but if other commissioners would like to see it more specific, then, you know, I can certainly modify the motion. And then is there findings? We don't, is there findings like, I don't see this in here.
So the findings are in Exhibit 2, I believe.
Mhm.
And so you can reference those, incorporate those by reference if you'd like.
Yes.
You don't have to read through all
So
of them.
I can make the findings for CEQA, and I can make the required findings for a conditional use permit. Thank you.
Vice Chair Birch.
So despite my safety concerns, I will second the motion because I do agree about the need for retail. I just wanted to voice those concerns so that the applicant could hear it and understand the nuances of that particular space. And so that as they, you know, develop the space and start hiring, they just make sure they keep an eye to some of the sort of, like I said, special nuances of that particular site.
Yeah, in particular, the kids coming through in the afternoon in hordes. Yeah, I think so.
And Chair Janoff,
Yes.
if I could just get confirmation from the maker and the seconder that it also incorporates the modified hours in the desk item, I believe it was, from 12 to 6 a.m. to 12 to 8 for the goods deliveries to the store.
Yes, I would include that.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Any other comments on the motion? I don't see hands raised, so I'll call the question. Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Tavana,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Suzuki, Vice Chair Birch,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion passes. All right. Are there
Before we
appeal
move
rights?
on, Chair, I'll just, yes, there are appeal rights, so thank you. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision to the Town Council. Forms are available online and at Town Hall. There's a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within.
All right. Thank you for that. We now move on to item 5, other business. And this item is to review the draft updated traffic impact policy and provide feedback. And I understand, are we going to have a report on this from Ms. Smith? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Janoff and commissioners. Last time I presented this related item to this commission was in June 2020. Staff is happy to return to the commission to discuss the draft updated traffic impact policy. In addition to the staff report, we also provided a desk item. The purpose of the desk item is to share the project webpage as an information resource. This is the outline of my presentation this evening. To start, it's important to mention that the town started the process of transitioning to using vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, as a matrix in conducting CEQA transportation analysis, started all the way back in 2019. The town council has made several decisions leading to the completion of the efforts. The update to the traffic impact policy is one of the final steps in this process. In addition to the council decisions, the council and the planning commission held a joint study session in October 2019. There are many technical terms and definitions associated with this topic. It's very, very kind of technically heavy. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining them, but if you have questions and you'd like me to explain further, please just let me know. The transition to using VMT as the metric has triggered this update to the town's current traffic impact policy. The draft policy looked completely different, as we explained in the staff report. The staff prepared this table. Next slide, please. Thank you. To provide a comparison of how the current policy is different from the draft update policy, and in 4 major areas. Mostly for your consideration will be in the purpose as well as the technical guidance. The purpose, because we are doing things differently under the new CEQA guidelines. The purpose of the updated policy is to add this the guidance in evaluating CEQA impacts and mitigation. The technical guidance, our current policy kind of group how we conduct CEQA analysis. CMP stands for Congestion Management Program, as well as the level of service analysis. Group all 3 of them together as one set. Nothing is wrong under the old rules because that's how things were done. But under the new CEQA guidelines, we provide separate guidance for the separate analyses, CEQA, CMP, as well as the level of service. The other, just a quick note on the organization. The current policy is pretty short. Everything is in one document. The draft policy, we separate the policy piece in the main document. And the TA, the Transportation Analysis Guidelines, is very, very comprehensive at this point, and it's used as an attachment as long and along with other attachments. So the next slide, in addition to the summary provided in the staff report, I would also want to highlight the 3 key issues in this update. I will also provide a few examples to walk you through how projects will be evaluated in the proposed new process. So hopefully the examples will kind of make things make more sense. The first one is the so-called CEQA relief for projects that are consistent with the general plan on zoning. This is a very, very important point. The staff recommendation throughout this process with the help from our consultant, our overall approach is to take advantage of the CEQA streamlining provision, which will help us ask the applicants to prepare meaningful CEQA transportation analysis. I would also like to point out that just because our draft policy would not require projects that are consistent with the general plan to prepare additional environmental review, it doesn't mean that these projects will get a free pass. And I think I hope to make that point more clear when I walk you through the examples. The second point is the Vmp Significance Thresholds. Is a 4-page long. The council passed it via a resolution in their November 2020 decision. The third piece is the Vmt Mitigation Measures. We're recommending a so-called town-wide approach rather than a project-specific approach. And this is the area that I will explain further. One quick note is in the attachment 3 to the draft policy, we provide some examples of VMT reduction or mitigation actions. It's a framework for us to consider those mitigation measures for VMT reduction. There is some additional work we will need to do, and I just want to actually just plant the seeds here. Next slide, please. So I try to use 2 examples to start. They're more straightforward examples to show how projects that will not result in any VMT changes. These 2 are very straightforward examples. As far as transportation impacts are concerned, I just want to narrow the scope to just the transportation discussion here. I'm using the project that is on your agenda tonight for your consideration, the 66 Blossom Hill Road. This project will not result in any VMT change. VMT as in the most simple form as defined as the trip generation times the trip length, the average trip length. Because I quoted in the staff report, the change in the existing shopping centers are considered the same for all the shopping center users. So in this case, in this example, no VMT analysis will be required under the draft policy. Another example is a single family home, more like a replacement, demolish a single family home and rebuild a new one. So for the trip generation as well as trip length, the VMT consideration, this is just no change. So in those two simple examples, the applicant will not need to do any VMT analysis. There may be some projects that are a little bit more complicated. The applicant will likely have to hire a transportation consultant to prepare some basic analysis to determine if there's any change to VMT. I want to, I think we'll take questions. Next, yeah, thank you. So the next example is more complicated. I'm using an example that a project that was approved is the Alberta Way project. Just first very quickly summarize. Under the current policy, that's how it was done. The applicant prepared the traffic impact analysis, the TIA, which cover both the SQL analysis as well as the level service. So it was just one document. The finding being there's no significant impact on the intersection level service. There was a voluntary improvements that were recommended, and the applicant was required to pay the traffic impact mitigation fee. Next slide. I want to show how if we will have the same project coming in under the new process if it's approved by the council. First, the applicant will have to prepare two separate analyses. One is a SQL analysis using VMT as a metric. The second one is a level service. You can see this as you will be getting two report cards instead of one. They will offer different perspectives on how the transportation system may be affected. The VMT analysis will focus on the regional impact as a result of driving, the people who use this land use generated trips are driving, while the level service analysis will give you more localized assessments on how the project may affect the streets and intersections, operations, or performance. So they're giving you kind of two different looks of our transportation system, the impacts on our transportation system. Go back to the SQL analysis or the VMT analysis. This project will first go through the step one to check whether the project is consistent with the general plan. And the answer is yes. In this case, the project can take advantage of the SQL streamlining provision, and then they would not be required to do a VMT analysis. In some other cases, the project may choose or may be required to do a project level VMT analysis. So keep in mind, even without the project level VMT analysis, this particular project will likely, not more than likely, it's definitely will still be required to provide VMT mitigation measures. So they even though they can skip the analysis, they still have to consider and propose those mitigation measures. On the local transportation analysis or the level service analysis, that is the same. There's no change to that process. The applicant will need to provide a TIA, and assuming the findings is the same, so it's the same going through that they will have to be required to consider those voluntary improvements and be required to pay the traffic impact mitigation fees. In this two sets of analysis, you can tell that our local analysis stays the same, and then the town has a very well-established process. So that is more straightforward. On the SQL process, since it's still very new, at least for Los Gatos, So the process is not like, we haven't got it all 100% figured out yet. When the project is required to propose VMT mitigation measures, they will have to consider the framework we propose in the attachment 3, the VMT reduction strategies. And then they have to further discuss the details with staff. So that's the area that, that needs a little bit more work, a little bit more case-by-case consideration. The good news is that the project list in the current traffic impact policy has many improvements that are consistent with the VMT reduction strategies. So we're not totally saying that we have no guidance to follow before we update the traffic impact mitigation program. So good. The next slide just show you what we mean by the VMT mitigation actions. And there's a lot more details in the work the consultant did for us, but this is a really simple diagram, gives us a good visual of how the different categories of VMT mitigation measures, as well as the effectiveness of each group of actions. Next slide, please. So I just want to quickly summarize. For this evening's meeting, we asked the Planning Commission to review the draft updated traffic impact policy and provide feedback to staff. Staff plans to bring a recommendation to the Council's policy committee at the November 23rd meeting, and then tentatively scheduled to bring the recommendation to the Town Council at the December 7th meeting. The staff report has like more information on the other related tasks. Our work is not done, even if when this is done, we know there are a few more steps we'll have to finish to really complete the transition to using VMT in the sequence transportation analysis. We see this update, the future work in updating traffic impact mitigation fee program to be an opportunity to identify and fund improvements that reduce VMT and also improve the performance of the town's transportation network. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for that overview. We're looking forward to understanding more how VMT is actually used in the real life examples that the Planning Commission will see in the future. But do commissioners have any comments or questions for staff at this time? Vice Chair Birch.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. You commented on attachment 3, and that was one that I just had a couple questions about. And it's probably going to be in general, and it's going to change as we actually see applications begin coming in front of us. But there were, there's different strategies here. And I particularly love that this is going to start looking less singular project specific and more greater town impact. I think that people have been asking for that for a while, and that's going to be really beneficial. And there are some great individual site level strategies that you put here that we've talked about in the past. And so I was wondering if, as we begin to see some projects come in front of us, like you used Alberto Way, that was a good example, right? So let's say that came in front of us under this, sometimes the suggestions of like a shuttle or things come from us, the commissioners, would it be then really be in the staff and the traffic mitigation plan where you would be encouraging rideshare or requiring shuttles or something? Or will that be something that will still be guided by the Planning Commission? I hope that makes sense.
Let me try to see how thank you for noticing the site level mitigation measures. I think it depends on how the conversation to go with the applicant. For example, provide ride sharing is probably a less expensive item comparing to the shuttle.
Right.
And it is the town actually at one point ran the school bus program, and I know how expensive that was. So that could be a pretty expensive mitigation measure.
Right.
So there are some that maybe we will want to consider both, something that can be done right away at the site level, but then also ask for that's how the fee program, when we update it, may come into play. This could take more than one project to be able to fund a local shuttle. So we see how maybe that's how things may work out.
Okay.
For that kind of localized as well as townwide improvements.
Okay, good. Perfect. That kind of answered how I was hoping we'd be looking at this then. It would be taking these measures and maybe not just an isolated case, but you would be trying to look at it townwide and how we can implement these things. So that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you for the presentation. I was just trying to think through that like example, and I was thinking about Alberta Way because I was on the commission when we did hear that. So I'm glad you keeping LOS because I think that'll give residents a lot more comfort because VMT is still kind of this concept and doesn't have any teeth around it at the moment. And so, but the other side of it though is if considering an applicant like Alberta Way or the North 40 or what all these other things that are going to come down after with the additional housing requirements, are other jurisdictions doing what we're doing, which is when SEEK was required having the VMT analysis and also the local traffic impact analysis? Are we consistent with other jurisdictions in terms of using both for big projects?
I think I would say the answer is very mixed. It's really all the different jurisdictions may be doing something different. There may be in kind of two categories. For example, San Jose is going more on looking at VMT only, but they also require the projects to consider so-called operational analysis. So it's instead of calling out a level service, but there are more jurisdictions of our size or similar sizes are taking our approach, even though their VMT analysis, the thresholds, everything can be different, but they're looking at, is it required for CEQA purpose? You have to use VMT as a metric, but many of them are still holding on to the level service. I would say for cities similar to Los Gatos, we are more aligned with them in terms of keeping both, at least for now, and just see how things play out over time.
Okay, all right. And then a follow-up question. You referenced a document for the benchmarks, but I mean, have numerical benchmarks been established that can be used for CEQA analysis going forward, or is that still in process?
Yes. I'm wondering if Jennifer can show slide number 11. So it was in the council's decision in November, the resolution of the council adopted to establish the threshold is actually pretty lengthy. That's why I couldn't quite say. So here's the significant thresholds. They're like under baseline conditions and under cumulative conditions. And I'm not going to read this because I hope I can explain this, but it's if you have questions. But yes, the threshold has been established and it ties into the general plan 2020 projections. The council was very ambitious in establishing those thresholds. I would say they're pretty restrictive in terms of where the council saw we should achieve in future years.
Okay, all right. So this is good. That's kind of what I was looking for. Now, I need to ask a follow-up question though. The general plan draft, I don't recall us having any projections of numbers for VMT. We talked about policies related to VMT. Are you just talking about the projections for population and housing growth?
Oh, yes, there is in the transportation analysis section. The numbers are consistent, at least at the time. I don't know if they're doing an update with the recirculation, but we have the same consultant, and they did do the general plan level VMT projections. And
For the
based on
EIR. For the EIR.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
for
All
the
right.
EIR.
All right. Okay. Got it.
All right, so unless there's any other questions, staff is asking us for review and comments. We're not approving anything or making any motion, is that correct? Yeah. So unless anyone has more comments to provide, and I'm sure if things come to mind from commissioners that I'd like to forward to staff, that would probably be welcome at any time. Commissioner Thomas.
I was just going to ask that if now that we've received the presentation and a few questions have been answered, we can look at this and then forward any comments to staff. Is that okay?
Yes, I think that's appropriate. Commissioner Barnett?
I had one recommendation, and that is that there be a table of abbreviations, because there's a plethora of them and it's difficult to go back to the original reference.
Good comment, Commissioner Hanson?
So I'm going to go back to what I was asking about earlier, and that is, I'm glad that we're keeping low level of service along with VMT for projects. However, I do think that if we can look forward, that if we find that the VMT is working pretty well, and we have good mitigation measures for that I could see maybe not conflicts, but it might be burdensome to have to do both kinds of analysis all the time going forward. So hopefully when this becomes more mature, that we can go to the VMT for everything, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it broadly, the mitigation strategies will be beneficial to level of service concerns for, because what we're hearing in the Planning Commission is that the level of service is declining in certain circumstances. And so the mitigation measures would certainly be helpful in addressing those concerns. Yeah, so I could see the same. All right, well, thank you very much. We'll close this discussion and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the report from the Director of Community Development, Director Paulson.
Thank you. Just a couple items. Wanted to update the commission. The Los Robles application for the lot line adjustment was appealed to council. They deliberated on that and then continued it to December 7th. So they haven't made a final decision on that appeal. Additionally, on December 7th, the town council will be holding a study session on the general plan. Staff will be providing some information that we plan to bring forward as Planning Commission and council consider the adoption ultimately of a general plan. And then they might provide some additional input on things they might think may be helpful for both bodies. So that will begin at 5:30 before the normal council meeting. And finally, on a happy note, just wanted to announce that Ms. Armour has been promoted to the planning manager, no longer interim. So congratulations to Ms. Armour. And that concludes my report.
Don't you love virtual clapping hands?
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jennifer.
Well deserved. All right, and then thank you for that report, Dr. Paulson. So finally, we have subcommittee reports. In addition to service on the Planning Commission, members of the commission serve on several town committees. Are there reports tonight? I don't see any. We haven't been very busy in that regard. All right, thank you all for your participation tonight. Appreciate the discussion and considerations, intelligent questions, and concern for the public. This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.